Shalom and welcome to Practical Spirituality here at Asia Torah in the Old City of Jerusalem overlooking the Western Wall. And today we're discussing a little bit about the relationship between prophecy and psychedelic medicines, plant medicines or chemical compounds that cause psychedelic experience in one's brain. And they're related in what we have to gain from this is that those are things psychedelic medicines are very dangerous for someone who's not ready for them. They don't have a vessel for that amount of exposure to a reality that's the reality, way beyond the reality that we are privy to. See, the reality you see around you, everything you see around you, the room you're in or the car you're driving, if you're listening to this in a car or wherever you are, the reality around you is not being fully experienced, quite the opposite. It's your filters it's being filtered out as much as possible. And not only that, but you're even helping it get filtered out. Kabbalistically, God's light's getting filtered out of things, and there's much more light that's all around you, but it's being filtered right now. And that's good, because otherwise, I don't know what, you'd probably brush your teeth on your forehead. So things are getting filtered out, but not only that, you're filtering a tremendous amount. You know how much stimulation's coming your way right now, and you're filtering it so you can pay attention to me. So you're in constant filtering, and that's what we do. We focus. When we drive a car, there's a lot going on, but boy, do we filter out everything so that we stay safe and keep our eye on the car in front of us and the cars in the lanes next to us. We are focused beings that filter out as much as possible. And how much you're filtering out. I run a seminar on personal transformation built off everything I'm speaking about right now. And coming to New York this Sunday to Brooklyn and this following Sunday to Muncie, New York, for men and women. Brooklyn's just men. Anyway, but all that filtering that we're doing is kind of something that we love. We'll watch people. We will pay money to watch people focus. Like I can also throw a ball through a hoop that it fits through. I mean, it does fit. And I can throw a ball through it, but I can't necessarily do that from a great distance and over again. But I would like to spend $50 on a ticket to watch someone else do so. Which the truth is, I wouldn't really want to. There's other things I would rather spend money on, like, for example, hearing Steve Morse play guitar. And anyone who's never heard of Steve Morse, as soon as this class is over, you immediately go online and check out Steve Morse. But you watch Steve Morse play a solo, and you realize he's focusing extremely at high speeds. And his note choice, no matter how fast he goes, is even at high speed, seems to be playing slow, because how does he choose those notes with that care? And there's focus there, and I'll pay money for that. And I've seen him live many times. I've invested a lot in these kinds of concerts where people have focused their creativity in music. And so we'll pay for focus. And what is focus? Focus is just filtering out everything else. But the problem is being overly focused. Is when you're overly focused, things can turn drab. Things can turn bland, and you, for example, you need to make a living, and to make a living, you're going to have to work, and working means you're not just fooling around all day. And the fact that you're not fooling around all day means that you're focused on something. But if you keep doing that over and over again, well, then all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And people go crazy. And then people start using substances that cause a diffuse focus, for example, alcohol, or cannabis, or sports that will cause it. There's certain things that going camping. I mean, what's happening when we stare at that fire? Something happens. People can't not stare at a campfire. But that campfire is right in the moment. There's not a lot of filter when you're staring at a campfire. And there's theories why that is, and it's a similar thing. You know what another campfire is type thing where you can't stop staring at it? At least as you get older, is if there's a child in the room. because they're so in the moment that you can kind of grab the magic back from being with them and watching them. And which leads us to why a lot of people benefit from psychedelic medicine, is because they are reintroduced to the magic. They are able to see they're able to move from a overly focused, ordered world, filtering out all distraction, but it's become rote and mundane and no longer serves its purpose, which was either to pay your bills. It maybe pays your bills, but the point was to enjoy your life. And you've now just become a cog in a wheel. And you can keep that job, but you can keep it with magic. And it also can lose its, even a Jewish ritual can lose its magic and purpose very quickly. And we repeat prayer 3 times a day, the same exact prayer. And we do a lot of things with regularity. And if you don't keep the magic, well, then it's going to die on you. And unfortunately, many people's Judaism is DOA, is dead on arrival. And it's not that they shouldn't keep doing it. And how do you keep doing something that's DOA, that's dead on arrival? And by the way, the only way to revive something isn't to quit. The way you revive something is by sticking with it and then doing the necessary to whatever it is, whatever process it will be, to resuscitate it. But stopping it altogether is not going to be helpful. And this is what's called in Judaism is being what's called an Eved Hashem. Eved Hashem, or for female, it's called a Shifchat Hashem. And what that is on that ladder, Jacob's ladder. What is Jacob's ladder? Jacob's ladder goes toward the earth, which is a peculiar way of saying things, because I've never seen a ladder going towards the earth. It's on the earth. If the ladder ain't on the earth, it's floating, and that just doesn't happen. But notice the language is it's towards the earth. Mutzav artsa, towards the earth. Strange language, something worth discussing, maybe not now though. And its head, the head of the ladder, the top of the ladder is in heaven. It goes to the heavens, and that's the ladder we climb. That's why you're here right now. That's why you're listening to this. It's because you're on Jacob's ladder. And to really focus you, or unfocus you, is that part of that climb is getting to rungs that will blow your mind away. But that wouldn't be good to have your mind blown away. So therefore you can't access those rungs. Now obviously the top of the ladder is prophecy. And no one's going near those rungs because that would completely, it would obliterate your mind. Because you're not a vessel for that. It would totally obliterate you. But there are rungs that we could reach, but it takes courage. And part of that courage is various steps that we have to do to get higher up the ladder. But you don't lose the lower rung. And what is that lowest rung? The lowest rung is to serve God for no reason. Serving God for no reason. Not a lot of fun, not very exciting, hardly romantic. But I'm putting on my tefillin no matter what. I don't care what mood I'm in. I don't care what just happened to me. I don't care about getting, this happened, that happened, bad news. On, a phone call with bad news, or throwing up with a fever, or the person who turned me on to wearing tefillin in the first place has decided I'm a no-goodnik. I'll show him. No, I'm putting my tefillin on no matter what. That's service. That's the bottom rung. And what does it mean to be an Eved Hashem? What's the word Eved mean? Slave. Literally, it means slave. So what does it mean to be a slave of God? Well, you learn from slaves. What's a slave? Let's say a slave, your master. Let's say your master asks you to bring buckets of water to the roof so he can have a shower. And it's 3 stories up, and it's a lot of buckets of water to fill that tank so he can enjoy his nice 20-minute shower. And so imagine you've already done about an hour's worth of carrying buckets up to the roof, and you got about 3 hours left. And you run into the boss on the staircase. Can you imagine saying to your master, can you imagine saying to him, I'm not feeling it? What would your master say? What? What does that have to do with anything? And you're like, yeah, I guess you're right. I'll just get back to work. and start lifting the things. So you're feeling it, not feeling it. That's what the first rung of Jacob's ladder is. Feeling it or not, I'm a servant, period. With or without knowledge, with or without understanding, with or without the magic, with or without feeling, with or without the romantic levels of God, and I'm there. And now, what's so important about that level? Who wants it? Nobody. You want that to be your life? You want to live a Judaism like that? You want that kind of Judaism? Ain't nobody gonna want that, yeah? Or how do we say? Ain't nobody got time for that, yeah? Nobody got time for that, but you better have time for that because life's a roller coaster, especially if you're Jewish. You're going up and down all the time, and you're gonna have downs where you gotta have that rung. But I'll give you another reason why the ladder is this amazing analogy. And it's because, let's say you're on a, 20 rung ladder, which is a big ladder. You're 2.5 stories high on a 20 rung ladder. Now, let's say you're standing up on the 18th rung. You're way up there. Your head's already at the 3rd story beginning. You're way high off the ground. Now, are you glad there's a bottom rung? Are you glad about the lower rungs? You happy about those? Yeah, why are you happy about those? Well, that'd be helpful too, but you could probably jump the last 5-6 feet. What's good about the rungs at the bottom of a ladder? They're holding the ladder up. Yeah, I've seen cartoons as a kid where the cat's being chased by the dog. I mean, what was the name? Tom and Jerry. Tom and Jerry. Was Tom? And Jerry was the dog? No. Oh, that's not going to help. There was another one with a dog and a cat. Oh, really? Yeah, I think you're right. So anyway, what happens? The cat is being chased by the dog. He's about to get eaten. And he runs up this ladder. And the dog, can't run up a ladder like a cat can, so he's kind of below. But what happens? For every rung the cat touches, the rung falls out. And after a while, it splits. And the cat falls, and the dog's like, ah, and the cat runs, And you need the lower rungs to hold your ladder together. And this goes in all relationships, because ultimately we're talking about relationship. And you have to have, for example, in marriage, something that works when there's no magic. Because we don't believe in divorce when the magic's gone. I hear people always say, we fell out of love. We don't love each other anymore, or whatever I've heard over the years. Obviously there's a time for divorce, and otherwise there wouldn't be an entire tractate of Talmud explaining how to get it done. Because it's not a simple task in Judaism. It requires, it's not simple to defrag or construct a union of two souls that happens in Jewish marriage. And so it has to be written out by a scribe on parchment. It's a whole big deal. And it has to be done. Civil marriage does nothing to that bond. So you're married to that person forever until that thing is created. That thing is called a get, by the way. I don't know how you spell that in English. I guess G, put 2 T's maybe. But you can put 1 T. It stands for get lost. So you can have, that's called a get. Anyway, but in marriage and in all relationships, you don't always feel it. With children, like what? You don't feel it, so you're not going to feed them? They're not going to call their teacher who's waiting for a phone call because your kid's not acting right, or you're not feeling love right now because they're frustrating you. So those bottom rungs of the ladder are very important, and it really separates the child from the adult. Those bottom rungs separates them. Because think about it, like there's societies like Southern California where you only do what you feel like doing. Now, not everyone in Southern California lives like that, but I know a lot of people who do. But here, what's the key word in there based on our subject? You only do what you feel like doing. What's the key word there? Feel, yeah. And what if you don't feel like it? Now what? Now what happens? You're out? And the East Coast is represented by people doing things they don't feel like doing, but it's right. They do things they don't feel like doing, but it's the right thing to do. And they'll do it, and maybe they'll do it short, maybe they'll do it quick, maybe they'll pay someone to do it. But it gets done because it's right. even though they didn't feel like it. And believe me, I get cases all the time. Right now I got a case of a suicidal person, seriously suicidal person, whose wife has left him with the children. She left with the kids. And a seriously suicidal person with an autoimmune disease that's eating his body. And I needed $2,000. Now, what coast do you think I started sending WhatsApps to? Yeah, not one. I got plenty of people on the West Coast. Not one WhatsApp went to the West Coast. Every WhatsApp went to the East Coast, and it went specifically to people who do what they don't feel like doing. Now, I don't know what will happen. It's $2,000 is what's needed right now to deal with some rehabilitation stuff. But we'll see what happens. But I was hitting East Coasters who will do what they don't feel like doing. If you think about it, that is the difference between a child and an adult. But you meet a lot of people who, let's say, get close to Judaism, who weren't raised close to Judaism. They get close to Judaism, and they get this fire into them that they're just going for it. And but they lack the maturity of the tenacity that it takes to continue on that path when the roller coaster's on a downswing. They lack that tenacity. They're so used to being high, and the latest high is Judaism, but it's not high right now because God's obviously finding them pretty worthy. You think about it, if you're constantly gifted intense feeling in your Judaism, that means God's betting on you. He likes you a lot because he's putting lights where most people don't have them, and things are glowing, and you know you're favored right now, big time, and you should use that big time. But you're particularly favored if he takes the lights away, because that means now you're going to need some muscles. You need some muscles and tenacity and commitment, and to be able to be consistent where you don't want to be. And that, as I said before, separates the adults from the child, because I don't feel like it right now, but it's right. And that the adult says, but it's right. And the child says, well, I don't feel like it. And from there, you reach a new vista, because when you serve or relate to a spouse or anyone, or in work or anything you do, if you relate to it as a commitment without a reason and without feeling, without anything else but it's right, and you relate to it that way, you do get new vistas that you could never, listen carefully, you get to new vistas that you could never have achieved without it. You understand? That muscle that can pull you through something when you're no longer feeling it, but you do it anyway because it's right, will bring you to a vista. A vista meaning a vision, a revelation in your growth that could never have been achieved had you not had the staying power to stay consistent when you don't see the light. And it's the same thing in marriage. It's I'm in no matter what. There are no reasons that pull me out of this thing. I'm in. Nothing will take me away from you, says someone to their spouse. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can say. I'm in. And then in even the darkest times, you will see the light in the future because of that level of commitment. Now, of course, that's very rough when the other person doesn't have it. And who knows what you get wounded people. There are wounded people. But anyway, for us is that to have the experience of expanded consciousness, it takes certain things. So I'd like to discuss some of those things that it takes to get to expanded consciousness. So we discussed one already. One is consistency, and that's unreasonable. When I say unreasonable, meaning unreasonable. I don't let reason stop me. I'm serving no matter what. Bottom rung of the ladder is not disappearing. So that's number one is serious, heavy duty commitment. Uncompromising commitment, whether I feel it or not. It's the adult. And the another thing is to have the maturity to not have to have things your way. Not having to have things your way. And perhaps this is why to make it anywhere in Kabbalistic circles, and certainly on the ladder towards prophecy, it requires being married. Because when you're married, it's not always going to be your way. And it's quite often not your way. And just add kids. And it's like, it's just not your way over and over again. And after a while, there are times where you feel like you're going crazy. Sometimes you feel like you're just going to go nuts. And especially if you have a lot of kids, you feel like you're just losing it. And by the way, it's hard to know how many kids to have exactly. And one guy walked in with 12 kids, and a secular Holocaust survivor lady just looked at this guy in her old folks home, and she said, "How many?" And the Hasidic man looked at her and said, "Till 6 million." And so it's hard to know exactly how many kids to have. You obviously want to have many, because if you're Jewish, you're not creating more overpopulation, meaning you're not creating more problem, you're creating solution. And we want to create as much of that solution as possible and raise your kids as solutions to the world's problems. That's what the Jewish people are meant to be. So raise your kids as solutions. So you want to have a lot, but on the other hand, you don't want to go totally crazy. So you got to figure out what you can handle. And I'll tell you, one of the things that's not in the criteria of how many children to have is your finances. Why? Well, there's various reasons why. One of the reasons is because each kid comes with their own mazel. We have a tradition that each kid comes with their own bank account, so to speak, their own mazel. You don't feed your kids feed your kids, meaning God feeds your kids, and each kid you add to your home is a new mazel. That's one of the beauties of getting married, is whatever your mazel is, it's being joined by someone else's mazel. And so if you've kind of had lousy mazel and you marry someone with pretty good mazel, well, now you have medium mazel. And that's going to be good for you. And I for sure, I have very powerful mazel, and my kids and my wife have learned to rely on that, which is great because it's caused them to have very good mazel as well. But when you have a child, that's not your job to pay for that child. That's their mazel. Now, obviously, if you're living with luxuries and you're just an expensive carbon footprint on this world, well then, getting your kids paying for all that, and maybe that's off, that's not part of the deal. like it could be that if you're going to have a big family and you don't want finances to be of concern, because you're going to utilize this fact that each kid brings their own mazel, when I say the word mazel, for those of my Gentile students who don't know what that means, it means that each person comes with their own, mazel's the truth is, it's a zodiac disposition. The word zal means flow, and a mem before the word means a cause of flow. Mem is always causative, the M sound. So mazal means the cause of flow, and every person has a certain zodiac flow that is their mazal. And in fact, the word zal means liquid as well. And like liquid soap in Hebrew is called sabon, that's soap. Nozlim, which means liquid. Nozlim, zal. Okay, anyway, every person has a mazal, and it's interesting. The Jewish people's mazal is every Jewish person has mazal as well, but their mazal is irrelevant regarding the day to day. Meaning people's mazal really shifts. There's different influences by day, because think about it. What is your zodiac? It's based on a birthday. Well, what's a birthday? Birthday is a day in the calendar. Well, the calendar is shifting all year, which means that your mazal is going to have a different influence each day based on the calendar shifts. Except the Jew, as we learned from Abraham, and this week's Parsha introduces Abraham, and it's exactly the Parsha, where Abraham says he's not going to have another kid, and God's like, yeah, you are. That's this week. Lech lecha. God's going to cause this 90-year-old man to, or no later, he's going to be 99, I think, when he will conceive Jacob with his 90-year-old wife, who was barren. Abraham has a conversation with God, and this is a midrashic tradition. By the way, the word medrash means a oral tradition. that's there to teach us. It's our tribal oral tradition that comes down the history of our tribes, the Jewish tribes, that are there to teach you these amazing lessons about reality. So are they literal? No. Are they there to teach you about reality? Well, I thought reality is literal. Isn't reality literal? And the answer is, if you ever want to understand reality, you're going to have to understand nuance. Nuance is a very important part of reality. Try having a conversation with a human being without being somewhat understanding of nuance. That's the danger of Asperger's, is they don't see they don't see nonverbal communication. There's nuance. How do you know a conversation's over, for example? The person you're talking to, or it might be you, will turn your foot in the direction you're going. Every human being does that. So let's say I'm talking to Sam over here, and I realize what time it is, and I got to go. You'll just see my left. If I got to go this way, you'll see my left foot go like that. And you will end it. I don't have to end any conversation. You'll end it because you get nuance. And that nuance lets you know, let's wrap this up with honor for both of us. And it will get wrapped up. But there are people who won't see that. One of those ones is the famous Asperger's, which is, some highly skilled and amazing people have, and it's hard to notice that they have it. And well, you better be a very committed woman or man to be married to someone with Asperger's, because they're going to miss it all. All that nonverbal stuff that happens between man and wife will never be experienced by them. And so, marry someone with Asperger's, well, you better be. We spoke about it earlier. You better be committed, like way more than 99% of humanity, that you're willing to not have someone recognize your nonverbal cues. Now, anyway, so medrash is for nuance, and nuance is very important. Nuance is everything, really. We do have, hard facts, but then there's nuance, and nuance is super important. And that's why we have the Medrash to teach us about the nuances. So this particular Medrash talks about Abraham having a conversation with God, because as you look in the Parshas, God says, you're going to have another kid. So what you don't see there, you have to click on the Medrash. Then it takes you to the website where the Medrash explains, the oral tradition explains, that God says to Abraham says back to God, I'm not going to have another kid. And God's like, looks at him like, you're going to tell God what's going on with your progeny? And Abraham says, excuse me, Rabbi, but I'm the master of zodiac. I know zodiac, and I know my zodiac disposition. I even know my star, my heavenly body is Jupiter. It's called in Hebrew Tzedek. My heavenly body is Jupiter, and based on where Jupiter was in the sky when I was born, no kids. At which point, God says to him, take your protein pill and put your helmet on. And he's looking down at Jupiter now. He's way above the zodiac. He's looking down at Jupiter and he's like, whoa. And all of a sudden, Jupiter, God, I don't know what he does. He goes, and Jupiter goes like, and he's meaning just to show out Abraham, that he's the one who put Jupiter where it was, and he can put Jupiter wherever he wants. You think God moved Jupiter in this story? I highly doubt that God moved Jupiter at that point in the story. But God, in the story, says he moves Jupiter and to show Abraham who's in charge here, and it goes to where Abraham's going to have kids, so to speak, but it doesn't say that in the Medrash. And because God probably didn't move Jupiter. I don't even know what would happen to our solar system if God decided to take a body in our solar system that big and move it. I don't know what would even happen if such a thing happened. Anyway, and then Abraham says, I guess I better go buy a crib and a stroller, because by the time he came back down, things were in process, and lo and behold, kids came, and not just a few, like a bunch of kids. He had Ishmael with Hagar. He had Isaac with Sarah, and then he remarries after Sarah's death. a woman named Keturah, who our tradition tells us it was actually the original Hagar, that he married Keturah, which means incense, had 6 kids, sent him eastward to the land of the east. And that's why Hinduism, like the highest caste, is Brahmin from Abraham. It's their traditions come all from Abraham, those 6 kids. Different class, but I've got that class online somewhere. Now, you have to be able to let go of reality. You have to be able to loosen up your grip. Human beings are terrible at that. I mean, really horrible at that. We are really, we're really good at kind of ossification. This is the problem with elderly people. Elderly people, they've just done the same patterns long enough that they've lost all their neuroplasticity, which is again why they love to stare at children who have all their neuroplasticity. You think about it, once you're in your 60s, 95% of what you're even seeing is just predictive models. You know, it does exist out there, but you don't see it. You're in your predictive models. And that's why you'll notice they're less and less with a trait of openness, because they just don't want to mess with their predictive models, and you don't want to take them out of their comfort zone too much. People get older, 70s, you know, they just don't want much else than, they like to watch, you know what they really like to watch is television. Because it's very predictable what each actor will do on that. When I say television, I mean specifically sitcoms and other dramas where you know the character, you can guess what they're going to do in every situation. But the situations change up every episode just enough so that they sense there's novelty, but everyone's acting predictably. And but that's that is very detrimental to spiritual attainment. And one of the beauties of spiritual achievement, which is obviously the goal in Judaism, is that your neuroplasticity stays. Did you know that elderly Jewish spiritual seekers who like spent years and years and years seeking have the neuroplasticity of children, of little ones, like real little ones? They have the neuroplasticity of children. I remember one of the elders said to our class once, we were learning esoteric knowledge, and he said, you know the difference between you and I, because we're all blown away by the last idea, and he says, you know the difference between you and I? He said, you will take what you just learned and see how to fit it into everything you've ever known. He says, and he's like many years our senior, I am now readjusting everything I've known to what we've just learned. That's how plastic his brain is. Meaning he was literally going to have an amazing day of reconfiguring everything he ever knew based on this, really beautiful thing we had just learned. While the rest of us were like, okay, let's see where this fits in. And we were quite young. I mean, we were all, that night I think I was in my 30s at the time, and here we are with this elderly, Kabbalistic wizard who's now readjusting everything for this one piece of knowledge that doesn't even relate to what we wouldn't think relates to anything other than the subject, but it does, and he knows how it does because of his understanding the network of this divine prophetic body of wisdom. It's all deeply networked. And so, now, why are we discussing being able to let go? The reason we're discussing being able to let go is because you want your mind blown, but you don't want it blown to bits. You understand? You want your mind blown, but not blown to bits. And if you are going to resist where the wisdom takes you, meaning the wisdom's taking you way beyond anywhere you were in the past, if you are going to resist that, well, it's going to blow you away. You've got to practice surrender. It's called surrender, and you have to practice surrender. And when I'm saying surrender in this case, when I want to be specific, that I'm talking about the kind of surrender that, and a very mature surrender, that you're able to put on hold everything you've ever known and allow yourself to be shown something, bigger and at the expense of what you've known till now. And so that's a big letting go. And not everyone's quite ready for that. But based on how ready you are for that is how much light you can get. That's how much light you can receive, and therefore go up a rung on Jacob's ladder. So the requirement to get up higher on the ladder requires this level of maturity of being able to let go and to receive that. Kobe.
What you just said about surrender, like in essence, I know we're very different from the other Abrahamic religions, but we have somewhat something in common there. It's like Islam literally means surrender, and it's a big idea of surrender in Christianity.
Sure, yeah.
Like to branch the roots together.
No, even though, so it's interesting you're bringing that up. The question, if you didn't hear the question, is wouldn't that point to something in common with the other world's traditions? And not just Abrahamic traditions, but other traditions. I mean, really anything. Military, like how do you join the military without surrendering to your officers and your commanders, sergeants? So, but yeah, I think everything requires a certain amount of surrender to get anywhere. So, but that's about where the commonality would end. Is that to get anywhere, you need a certain level of surrender. You were in the military, right? Was it easy to surrender?
At first, very much so. Like you still have the idea of who you are, what like you do.
So it's very difficult at first.
At first, it's like you got so much pride in your head of who you are, and they slowly
Chip away at it.
Exactly. No, I was just trying to find like obviously I don't want to become Muslim. I don't say I don't want to become Christian, but like I was thinking maybe there was something that could be.
Well, earlier when I said it was interesting that you brought up the other world traditions, is that those traditions is I was speaking about this the other day, but I got distracted. Is you have to think about what you're doing when you mess with someone who believes in false traditions. And when I say false traditions, what I mean by that they're not necessarily false traditions, but their root, meaning their foundations, their genesis, the beginnings of them were not based on something that was true. But today, many of them make up the hearts and minds of much of the fabric of traditions in homes of every household in the world has some traditions. And anyway, but here's the thing: this is what I wanted to share: is that when someone has surrendered to anything, you've got to think twice before you mess with those people. You got to think twice about that, because there's another word connected to surrender, and that's devoted, like you devote yourself. Surrender and devotion reach a place inside human psyche and emotional circuitry that's sacred, even if what they're into is not sacred. Like, for example, idolatry. To us, does Judaism consider idolatry sacred? Not at all. In fact, punishable by death in Judaism. So not sacred. Actually, the ultimate profane thing is idolatry. Yet there's people all over our planet and throughout history who have gone to that sacred place inside of them in dedication, devotion, surrender to something that's idolatrous. So they now have a sacred place inside of themselves, dedicated. And I think we've all maybe surrendered to someone, like we've surrendered our hearts to somebody. When maybe some of you, if you weren't raised protected like my children, But if you're raised more like me, thrown to the wolves, you probably gave your heart to someone who didn't really have the ability to care for it the way it should have been. And there was certainly no insurance policy, which is called marriage. And so, but you surrendered a sacred part of you, and you'll notice that that place is still there, even if you're married. And even if you're married for years, and even if you have children, the sacred place of that surrender of that, surrendering that deep place of you has been given to somebody who may be married to someone else right now and playing with their own children, and their heart's also in yours. And that will just be war wounds. You're someone who's been through war and's got wounds and got big scars and whatnot. They're going to have to live the rest of their lives with that, and that's okay, because we're vulnerable, and we all go through all kinds of stuff, and sadly part of that is war wounds of relationships. If you guys want to do your children a favor, make sure you protect them till they're married, so that when they finally surrender that sacred place of the heart, it will be with someone who's placed a ring on the finger or gotten a ring on the finger, and has so that it's not a war wound later, but it's something very beautiful came from, as opposed to something horribly painful. Anyway, but I just wanted to mention that, because I think people are sometimes, when they're getting a lot of fervor for something, either Christians feeling very feverish about their Christianity, and now they're talking to a Jew, or Muslims talking to a Christian, or a Jew who's really excited about their Judaism, now they're talking to a Muslim or a Christian or a Hindu or anyone else, or an idolater. They can be insensitive to that sacred place that someone's gone to, even though it was for the profane. We have to be sensitive to that place of somebody, and you just can't be flippant about that place. That place is serious business. And that being the case, also, just one more takeaway from that is that two more takeaways. One is you do want to go there. So if you haven't gone there in your Judaism, it has a little switch on the side, I think, to turn off the sound. Anyway, you do want to go there, and if you do want to go there, meaning if you haven't gone there to that level of surrender, you're missing out. Whether it's a relationship, whether it's Judaism, whether it's God, whatever it is that you're into, if you haven't gone there, you're not going to get the benefits. Because certain things only come with surrender, with vulnerability, with fragility. And it's very interesting that way. And how fragility is where the magic is. And who's more fragile than the children? Toddlers. But they've got all the magic. They're the ones looking with wonderment, and we look at them with wonderment, and they're the most fragile, and they've got the most vulnerability, and yet they've got the most magic. So there's a connection between fragility and magic, fragility and great depth of experience, and that fragility is for human beings is expressed through surrender, because we can make a move called surrender. We can make a move that takes us into a level of devotion that is way beyond what someone can achieve without it. It's really light years ahead of that. And we need to go there. All of us need to go there. And there's certain people who that's really hard to go there for anything. Yeah.
So when you're speaking about surrender, are we speaking about the ego? And when he said it was very difficult because he had a person, he knew who he was, and then they're chipping away. Are we talking about ego? Are we surrendering that in order for information to come?
Ego's, yeah, his example was about ego. But it can be a lot of other things too. It can be your schedule. It could be Shabbat. It could be your social life. That's going to be part of the surrender. Surrender is like pretty encompassing.
Is it also the idea of like surrender, like I don't know anything, this guy does, therefore I'm gonna.
That's definitely like to get the knowledge, you're going to need to surrender. You can close the door to get to Taekwondo, to get anywhere in martial arts. There's going to be a lot of surrender to your sensei, the master of the art that you're studying. Surrender is really important. You don't really get anywhere without it. And how many people do we know who are surrender resistant? And again, many of them are damaged. They did surrender and they got hurt. And how many people do I know have surrendered to false traditions? You know, how many people you know surrendered to false traditions? You know, a lot of people surrendered there. So you can't get anywhere without surrender, but you also it's a bit of a gauntlet to make sure you don't surrender to the wrong things. And I want to mention one more thing that's interesting, that how magical surrender is that if you surrender to the wrong things, you can still blow through walls and live in the miraculous. Because God put in our creation that someone surrendered to something will have miracles.
Even if it's the wrong thing?
Yeah. There's certain things, like for example, Ratzon, desire. Have you ever wanted to do the wrong thing? God let you do it? Yeah. He even orchestrated it. Couldn't have happened without him orchestrating it. So, but you wanted it. That's the key phrase. That because you wanted it, you could even go against God. He put it in creation that anyone who wants something, that the world will conspire to help you get it. But also, surrender will lead to miracles for someone in the wrong tradition. And to them, they're like, well, there's verification. It must be true, this tradition I'm adhering to, because, gee, I surrendered to it and I'm getting all these miracles and stuff. So another thing we're learning about surrender is that it is not verify. It doesn't verify anything. All it verifies is you surrendered to something. You understand? That's all it verified. It didn't verify what you surrendered to is true. It just verifies that you're surrendered to something. It doesn't verify the veracity of that which you have dedicated to.
So we have a code of ethics, and for most of the part, we know what's good and what's not. How does somebody recognize a surrender to something good versus something not good? If God allows you to do it, regardless, all you have to have is desire or wants, God lets you have it. So how does somebody learning on a personal basis, how could you navigate through that? That sounds...
That's an excellent question. Most people would never do what I'm going to say, but you actually have the courage to put it all on the table and see what's true, which is rare. I mean, Asia Torah was built on this institution where I'm speaking from, was predicated on the fact that human beings, which was a very short time, but it was somewhere around 1967 till about 2000, maybe 1999, 2000, but it capped at 2006. It was over. But that people would be willing to put on the table everything out there and see what's real. And our entire body of intellectual property here is predicated on that. People would do that. People would do that, and we had no idea people were going to stop doing that because it seems natural to do that. And so, but the answer is that you'd be willing to put it all on the table and get to the truth. Truth to the what's the word? There's a good saying. Truth to the truth to the utmost. There's one more word there. I forget what it was, but like meaning you'll sacrifice it all for it. And I got to live through that because I got here in 91. It was the second half of it, 91 to 96 as opposed to 67 to 91. And I got to be here for that. And wow, I just can't begin to express to you the energy and excitement that was happening here. It was just unbelievable. And you know what? You know who it drew more than anyone else? High IQ, successful, confident, for some reason quite beautiful and handsome people. Meaning it drew people who had an inordinate amount of confidence. Well, if you grab all of world Jewry and you kind of take the cream off the top, that's who came. Why affluent? Because they were raised in a home where they weren't, it's usually old money affluent, that they weren't being raised thinking they were going to starve if they don't join the machine of, the machine of the financial world, that you got to make a living and stuff. They were affluent people, and they're what I call, what trust babies are? Trust babies are children born of very wealthy families. But then there's these searchers, which are kind of like hippies, so I call them trustafarians. And trustafarians are great. They're amazing. In fact, you're in an institution built off of only trustafarians, and everything you hear here is because of those trustafarians. And they're amazing people. First of all, they're highly educated. They've been told that they can do anything they want. Meaning there's just no limitation built in. Their search for truth doesn't have an end, because think about it, the rest of the world, you could be the biggest hippie in campus, but in the end, you got to pay your bills. So you're going to have to face reality. Cut your hair. Yeah. Trustafarian, they don't have to cut their hair. They don't do anything. There's no obligations, and there's never going to be something they got to face later. They get to just keep searching and keep digging and keep, clawing their way through this thick veil called material, physical world. And they happen to be particularly brilliant people, born of particularly brilliant people, because that's just the nature of the beast, is that affluent people, not always, but often, are of high IQ. And there's a built-in hierarchy of brains and money. They go together. Brains and money go together. Not always. There are exceptions, but in the major part of the bell curve, brains and money are correlated. And now you got two brainy people having kids, and those kids were raised with affluence, and they were being sold a bill of American dream goods, which, you don't have to be a genius to poke a hole in that. The American dream is like, oh, that's cute. You also want me to buy a big giant bucket of steel that drills through gasoline like nobody's business while perpetrating Middle Eastern wars, just so we can have our pipeline running through Afghanistan, no, that doesn't sound sustainable to me as a somewhat smart, affluent kid growing up in the American dream. I don't want your dream, because it's going to be someone else's nightmare. And in the end, it'll be all of our nightmare. We'll all inherit a nightmare. It's certainly not good for Israel, and now we're all paying that price with the lack of security in a Middle East fueled by the money of Western consumption. That's created the vulnerability that you experience as you sit here right now. So anyway, but that's who created this place, and we can put it all, back to your question, is we can put it all on the table and work through things and come to something true that's worth dedicating our hearts to and surrendering to and going to the sacred place that it goes to. I'm in a particularly interesting situation because I'm totally surrendered, but I'm in a position professionally where I allow to question it all, because otherwise I can't have this job. I got to speak to a materialist atheist here 2 days ago, where you're sitting, and it's going to be a great video. That's going to be one of our better live feeds in a while. And I'm debating on the 24th here. If you're all here, I'll be doing a live debate with an audience in the Kirk Douglas Theater. It'll be me and Dr. Gerald Schroeder, who's a nuclear physicist who's witnessed 6 nuclear explosions working for the U.S. government, and he's a well-read author and created a lot of powerful scientific papers, who's a believer, and the two of us will be going head-to-head against 2 famous atheist personalities on with their own YouTube channels. And stay tuned for that. But it's very funny for me because because Dr. Schroeder is more intellectual. He's a real talking head. I'm not a talking head. I live from this place of surrender and dedication and devotion, and which has no intellect. It had intellect, but once I saw where I'm going is, it's pointing north and it's right. And when I saw that and I saw everything's working, it all fits and it makes sense, this thing. And so, but I'm in an interesting position because I can't walk in. I know how to talk about surrender, as you see, I'm discussing it, but I know how to talk about that sacred place. But at the same time, I got to somehow dance the intellect dance and play around with being able to entertain a materialist atheist position and be able to play with that a little bit. And I do believe this whole thing began with the question, your question, by no coincidence, I'm sure, from Portland, Oregon, about the connection of psychedelics to prophecy. But I do believe that that's part of the key to the whole equation, because what happens when someone ingests certain compounds and it does whatever it does in their brain, we know the brain science of it, but there's things that take place there that aren't explainable. They just aren't explainable. That only the witnesser, the actual observer of the experience, has a lot of things that just will never ever be explained in brain science, and is changed forever as a result, in ways that are just very interesting. For one example, is they go up an entire index point in the personality trait called openness, which is not possible. I mean, as far as science was concerned, wherever you sit in openness is going to be closed and not opening, as we discussed earlier, as neuroplasticity is going down as you get older, and more of what you see is going to be predictive models, less of what you actually see. And yet people will go up an entire index point of openness, and openness is a very good trait. It's a very good trait. I mean, why do you think most businesses, shut down in 20, 30 years? Even the biggest ones will be gone in 20, 30 years. Is because it's very hard to keep openness when you're at the top of a business. But if you're not open, you can't allow the percolation necessary of the dynamism of people actually on the streets, on the ground, using your product, that are going to percolate up and have you reinvent yourself as a company. And that doesn't come easily. So the high-tech world prides itself on the index, on the character trait, the personality trait called openness. They pride themselves on that, and you see they're doing a great job. They're really out there, and I always wonder how much they're not letting us see, meaning how much they already, how far could that iPhone or Samsung go, but they're only letting us know so much, so we keep buying, I don't know if there's what's called either planned obsolescence, which we're all nervous about, but there's also, it's also very strategic release of technology. Who knows what they know, but I'll tell you one thing's for sure is they have built into them, they have the openness. And not only that, but they encourage their employees, and especially the higher they get in this system, to be involved in the ingestion of psychedelic compounds. And Google in Silicon Valley is famous for the microdosing of LSD. That's just part of working for Google. You can give up your Starbucks, because you got other things going on, but it's creating a greater creativity, greater motivation, mental acuity, and it's driving the high-tech world to the next generation in ways that could never have happened without it. So where are we at on the yeah, we're on expansive, but specific. We were being a little more. We're talking about openness, but I was speaking about the sacred place of dedication, and which has no mind to it, and meaning you need mind to get there. But once you're there, you're going to a place that's beyond the mind, beyond the intellect, and that's why you witness miracles there if you live there. It's a great place to be. Oh, I was explaining why we need to go there for various reasons. So you don't get anywhere without it. You have to be very careful of it to make sure you don't wind up dedicated and surrendered to the wrong things. But there's something else I want to say about it. Oh, is that it brings us full circle back to the first rung of Jacob's ladder, which is, I'm in. I'm in. Which is another way of saying I'm in. You know, I'm in. Because when you're in, I'm in no matter what, including how I'm feeling, as we spoke about. But even I'm in no matter what the facts are, I'm in. And that's why it's so important you check the facts before you go in. But as long as you got the facts straight, you got to go to that place of dedication and risking political correctness right now. This could be a difference between the Hasidic and the Litvish communities. In a way, is well, I don't know about the modern communities, but maybe is that the non-Hasidic Ashkenazim and many of the Sephardic traditions that have gotten involved with the yeshiva community of Ashkenazim, they pride themselves on rationalism. They pride themselves on rationalism, but that is not the place of surrender. That is not the place of surrender. And the Hasidic movement prides itself on devotion. It prides itself on that. Now, show me any dedicated rationalist, I promise you he's surrendered. And show me any surrendered Hasidic guy, and I promise you he's got a lot of intellect going on and plenty of rationalism in there too. And it's just the nature of the Jew. You're not going to find one without the other. All I'm talking about is themes. Themes that we're going to drive home. So the Hasidic movement's going to drive home the dedication more. That's going to be the theme. And the rationalists are going to drive home rationalism. Either way, they're both going to have a level of surrender. But I personally want to be where the magic is. And the magic's in the vulnerability that comes with surrender. That's the magic. And I'm part of a magical community of Hasidic people. Really magical. I mean, they really do not, you know, their motto is don't tell me the odds in everything they do. And it's great. I just love the way they interact, and there's just no limitations. And it's throughout the system. It's not, I know non-Hasidic people who live that way as individuals, but I'm talking about communal, like they know somehow that it's enough that you are dedicated to something and it will come true. And it comes with being in a place whose theme is irrational devotion. And I like that. And I like the magic. I like the magic. I benefit a lot from that magic. And I'm so happy to train my kids in it. Because my kids are like, definitely don't tell me the odds, kids. And I think the wonderment of the magic keeps you young. And I think you have a more surface joy. You know, sometimes I go into synagogues, and this can go for Hasidic ones as well, where I know these people have a deep, deep joy. But on the surface, like the actual, you know, because joy is on a continuum. There's deeper joy, and then there's like just smiling and laughing and stuff like that. But there are sometimes I'll walk into a synagogue where you can come in. Sometimes I'll walk into a synagogue and there is no trace of joy there at all. And it's Shabbat. And everyone's in their finest. And they're singing happy songs. But if it's the Hasidic community, they're doing something like really heavy, like it's a heavier song. It's, you know, it's like, and maybe it's a non-Hasidic shul or yeshiva shul doing something kind of joyous, you know. But there's just no one smiling, and no one's clapping, and no one's holding hands for this little dance part here. And you know, it's clearly we should be in We should be linked up. But if I started holding people's hands, they would just pull their hands away. Like, you're embarrassing me. You know, there's a certain, it's got a Yiddish word called Ernstkeit. But to me, I believe it's a bluff. You know, it's just, we're not going to express joy here. And because, you know, this is all too important, you know, but to me, it's not just that part of the spectrum's being hidden. It's that it's not there. You understand? It's being, people, they're rationalizing that it's there. It's just not time for that or something. And by the way, they do let it all go once in a while. Like Purim with enough alcohol, those guys are hysterical. And because it's just all coming out, you know, like I don't do that because mine's coming out and I'm on a general release of joy on a daily basis, and Purim's going to come out more, but it's not going to be that distinguishable from the day before Purim. And whereas these guys, oh my gosh, it's like, I mean, it really comes out. And sometimes they get that way towards the end of a wedding, where it's finally like broken through. And it had to be their kids' wedding, by the way, not the guests. But you will see it start shining through at the end of their wedding, and suddenly they've moved into that place, and so it's available, but it's not. They don't have access to it. Now, if I had to choose between the two, I'll take the deeper joy any day. I mean, deeper joy is like way bigger than the external edge of the spectrum, but you can't pretend you're happy if you don't have full access to the spectrum of joy. You know, you got to have the deeps and the, you know, you can't play off as happy. Which leads me to another thought, if you don't mind me thinking this one out real quick, is you're only going to be as well as your leader. I'm not saying we can't surpass a leader. You can surpass your leader, but in a tradition where especially the Jewish tradition, where we're really focused on our leaders, like our kavod for, it's called kavod of Torah, but it's also called kavod chachamim, emunas chachamim. It's the dedication to our wise. Yeah, you can go. I'm just going on and on here, so you can go at any point. Thank God I've had a long format for the worst reasons, is Rabbi Neckemeyer had the flu this week, but I will wrap it up eventually. But anyone who needs to go certainly can. So you're welcome. So because I'm an hour and a half into my 50-minute class. So, or maybe an hour and 20 minutes into our 50-minute class. Long format, though, is the way to go. I mean, anyone know the intellectual dark web? 50 minutes, you don't get anywhere. You know? So, but here's the thing I want to think out here is that, and especially in Jewish tradition, where we're really, really focused on our leaders showing us the way and emulating them. And in fact, the Rambam even says that the commandment to emulate God is to emulate the wise man, meaning emulate the tzaddik, emulate the holy person. Could be the holy woman too. Emulate the holy. Why? Because Rambam says, now, by the way, he's very rationalist, Rambam. He's not into the esoteric, although he knew a ton about the esoteric. Oh, come on in. Table for 2, 3. Perfect timing, ladies. Just bring that third chair up and you can sit all together there. I like people staying together. Anyway, as soon as you sit, because these chairs are really loud, I'll go back to what I was saying. So just to catch you up, ladies, what we're talking about right now, I just switched subjects. What we're talking about is how, you know, in the Jewish world, we really want to emulate our leaders. So what if your leader isn't a particularly happy person? What if your leader is not particularly holy? Meaning they know a ton. They just know a ton. Like they've got all of Torah in their back pocket. But they're just kind of rationalists. You know, they're not so into the holy part. You know, there's a lot of holy part. I mean, how much do you think Judaism has more of? Instructions? Or, meaning just if you were literally just to add the documents, add the written documents, including all our oral tradition that's written, what do you think we have more of? Which stack goes higher? And obviously the stack's taller than the building here, but if you stacked them, it would go taller than this. I don't know, it'd be like the Empire State Building. Which one stacks higher? The information about instructions of God's will, like how to do God's will, which many Jewish leaders, that's their specialty, and that's who we're trying to emulate. Or all the material of holiness, the Kabbalistic realities and the Jacob's ladder stuff that climbs towards heaven. Which do you think would be a taller stack? Which body of information? So the halacha, same. What do you ladies say? Halacha. Yeah. So, okay, so either the same or maybe the halacha. Now, why would you ever guess that? You might guess that because you figure for every law, there's probably a spiritual reality about it. So it's 1-to-1, it sounds. And you probably think that way because you're from the tradition where everyone just studies what to do. No one ever studies that stuff, so how much could there be? So it turns out that I don't know the actual ratio, but it's somewhere over 5 times more information in the Kabbalistic, esoteric, Jacob's ladder, spirituality ladder. Something like 5 times more. And I can explain to you why. And you'll see how exactly, Sam. And that's, like, let's say there's a law, for example. I mean, you can really mention any law. Anyone want to mention a law? I don't care what it is. Positive commandment, negative commandment. Someone want to mention something? Any commandment. Pick a commandment, any commandment. What?
Shabbos.
Yeah, so Shabbos, okay? So Shabbos has a lot of laws. She chose a massive body of laws, like massive. And, for example, I have a 5-volume thing called the 39 malachas, which are the 39 acts of manipulating matter that you cannot do on Shabbat, yeah? So it's 5 volumes like this. And it's just off one word in the Torah, malacha. Don't do malacha. And it's this big. So for sure we know that the ratio of words in the Torah, malacha, to laws is going to be way different. There's going to be a lot more on malacha. Now, in Shabbos, the laws of Shabbos, which mostly are negative, thou shalt not. There's a reason why there's thou shalt nots. Why our holiest day of the week is mostly thou shalt not. You know why? Because for something special to occur, you have to have a lot of limitation involved. You have to have a lot of limitation. Like, let's say someone would like to enjoy a concert. So there's limitation. Shut your phone off. Shut your mouth off. Be quiet, especially if it's a classical concert. And there's rules there. Stay in your seat. You go sit in someone else, go poach someone's seat, and then they come. It's going to disturb everybody. So marriage, like there's a lot of don't do's there, man. You want to ignore the don't do's in your marriage, good luck having any intimacy. So the holiest day of the whole week is Shabbat. And what is achievable on Shabbat by you refraining from those 39 acts? Is connection with Hashem. And that's going to be, again, it's just going to be a massive body of information of what is available to connect to Hashem on Shabbat, compared to what you must refrain from. You understand? I'll give you an example of a positive. You brought up a negative commandment, but I'll bring up a positive commandment. I can choose anything. And even something very arbitrary, like tefillin. Tefillin has, hundreds of laws. I mean, there's more laws than just the black boxes and all the world's religions put together. But the tefillin, let's take an arbitrary law in tefillin. So it's just a little law. It just says, make sure your tefillin is above the hairline. Little law, not a big deal. Just don't let it drop below the hairline. And if you have a receding hairline, you got to remember where it was. But make sure the tefillin's below the hairline. Above the hairline. And so I always feel bad for these Chabadniks because many Chabad groups, the Chabad synagogues, all they got left is Persians who are willing to come. Like, who's willing to come? So, Persians. So the problem is in the Persian tradition, tefillin go on the forehead. Because whatever Persians went through over there and their, whatever their relationship to halacha was, I don't know that evolution, but somehow they lost that particular piece of information. So whenever you talk to Chabadniks with synagogues filled with Persians, it's their nightmare. It's their nightmare to have this whole community of people with their tefillin like sticking off their foreheads. And how do you know which ones are really students of the rabbi there and not just happy this rabbi's dedicated his life to give these Persians somewhere they can go on Shabbat? You'll see there will be like 1 in 10 of them will have his tefillin in the right spot. And I go up to the rabbi, I just happen to be there because I'm staying in a hotel nearby for the night or something. I'll go to the rabbi, I'll say, who's that one? He's like, he's my student. Like, he's my student. That one's that Musad over there is my student. Yeah. So, can you send me that water, please? You can throw it. So, anyway, so what I wanted to share was a principle that you're only going to grow as great as your mentor. You may grow beyond your mentor, and your mentor's job is to make you beyond him. Like, the biggest joy of a mentor in Judaism is when you've become obsolete, where your students have surpassed you. That's the goal of the mentor, is when you're no longer necessary. Meaning, every rabbi has to have the goal to lose his job. I would be overjoyed if someone could take my 3 to 4 o'clock and nail it more than I nail it. And if he were my student, that would be like the greatest badge of honor. And thank God, because I'm doing this so many years, I've been sitting through many classes of my students over the years who know light years more Torah, because I'm so busy loving the world that I'm not the guy sitting and studying all day. So they have been, many of these guys are that guy who sits and studies all day. And I've been able to sit through their classes. I've been able to call them when I have halakhic questions that I don't know the answer to. And I just happen to know he knows that cold. And I'll call him and get the answer real quick. And that's my joy. So the mentor has to see himself being surpassed by everyone. And every rabbi, a successful rabbi, should lose his job because he built his community so much that he's no longer the best suited for the position compared to the people in the community that he built. But us as the community, you're looking at that height of your mentor. That's probably as far as you're going to go, unless you, thank God, go beyond, which, please God, we'll all do. But, right? Your mentor has to be the person that's full of joy. And when I say joy, the full spectrum. They're not missing part of it, because if they're missing part of it, there's some dysfunction there. They can't be joyous only deep down. They have to also have at their fingertips the external kind of fluffy joy. The other thing is that they have to be holy. Why? Because that's what you want. I mean, don't you want to be like the holiest person? Don't you want to be so holy? Well, then you better have a mentor that's holy. Well, how can you have a mentor that's holy and joyous if they haven't? If they don't have never, they've never confronted the part of Judaism that's about holiness, And that part is called. I'll write it down since we're making a distinction here. It's called, in Hebrew, Limudei Hashem. Limudei Hashem. And then there's another thing called Limudei, I'm running out of room there, versus Limudei Ratzon Hashem. These are two separate bodies of wisdom in Judaism, Limudei Hashem and Limudei Ratzon Hashem. This one is the study of God, which is the holiness. The study of God and leads to the holiness. And this is the study, I'm going to run out of room, study of God's will. Study of God's will. And that leads to knowledge. And most specifically, alignment. More specifically, alignment. It leads to, because if you don't know God's will, if you haven't studied the laws, what God wants, so you will be out of alignment with God's will and wisdom. So you have to study this stuff to be in alignment. Another way of putting it is the word spiritual. Spiritual, the spirit is here, and the ritual is here. Yeah, spiritual. And so the spirit of what we're doing here, I mean, the whole point of it all is not, why is doing God's will not the point of it all? Why is that not the point of it all? Why is doing God's will not the point? It's not a fair question for these three ladies that came later because they missed the Jacob's ladder part. What rung is doing God's will? The very first rung of Jacob's ladder. What's that called in Hebrew? Ev. Shifchat Hashem. Eved Hashem. What is it? And what's it engendered by? What's the definition of someone who's a servant of God on that level? What did we say? What was its definition? The first rung on the ladder? Slave, good. Which means I serve God no matter what. Whether I'm feeling it, I'm not feeling it, I'm into it, I understand what I'm doing, I don't understand what I do. You know, like how much do I really know about like all the massive amounts of information what you get over studying Kabbalah? Like, for example, I mentioned that one arbitrary law of having the tefillin over the hairline. Why? Because the tefillin have to be, and now we go in the Kabbalah, has to be over this fontanelle. The fontanelle is, I like that name because it sounds like the fountain of God. It's a medical term, but it's the part of the brain, like if you feel a baby's head soft there, we all have an aperture right there, and the tefillin has to go over that aperture. And the only way we know it will go over that aperture if you make sure your tefillin doesn't drop below your hairline. What's the big deal with that aperture? Well, that aperture sits over the cerebral cortex. That's your frontal lobe. Cerebral cortex is where all your neurons are that just fire or don't fire. They are basically atheists because they catch all the smell and the touch and the sight, and they see this world, and they're basically atheists. And we have to impress upon at least men do, have to impress upon their cerebral cortex, the atheist in them, the oneness of God, and that's what's really going on. So I could keep going there, by the way. I'm not going to keep going there on what the tefillin do over the fontanelle. But I could keep going and going. In fact, I've taught over an hour class just on why the tefillin goes over the fontanelle. How long did it take me to say the law? 2 seconds? Tefillin above the hairline. Done. I've taught probably a good hour class on just what the esoteric knowledge talks about when it comes to why that is, why that's important, which is the spirit behind it, or the why, and the ritual is the what. And spending your whole life working towards becoming someone who has as much knowledge as an unhappy, overly, I shouldn't say overly, someone, an unhappy person with a predisposition of remembering lots of facts about how to align themselves with God. This alignment is probably going to lead me to be an unhappy person and an unhappy, knowledgeable person. Whereas if my mentor is someone climbing Jacob's ladder with diligence and dedication and sacrifice and devotion and surrender, and I'm choosing to emulate that person, and that person has, not a lot to do, but has the whole trajectory of joy, from the deeper joy to the, smiley and external joy. These people are out there, I promise you. In both the Hasidic and non-Hasidic communities, they exist. And I make that person my mentor. I mean, you tell me. What's your first name again? Jacob, sorry. Jacob, you tell me. If you saw two in a vacuum, like there's me and then there's another one of me, and one spends all his time dedicating to emulate a rabbi who's mastered this. And then there's another one of me who's dedicated my life to a guy who's also mastered this, but this is his goal and where his mastery is going. Like, who's going to wind up happy and holy? He's going to wind up happy and holy. And I just want to say one more thing. And this is going to sound a little crazy. And again, I'm risking a lot by saying any of this stuff because I'll probably start getting angry emails. And maybe I'm crazy, but I've met people who are nowhere on Jacob's ladder, but they're looking at Jacob's ladder. This is not Jacob's ladder. This is the first rung. I've met people who are desperate to climb Jacob's ladder, who don't know their knee from their elbow in Judaism, but they know enough to know that that's what they're after. And they're going to study, and they're going to align themselves, and they're maybe they already are, or maybe the guy's already been keeping Judaism for 3-4 years, but he's still, takes forever to even look somewhat normal in the community, but there's something about having him at my Shabbos table compared to a very learned guy who's wearing a business suit and a necktie and a mafia hat. There's something that, who knows 10 times more, the guy sitting across from him at my Shabbos table. There's something about the guy dedicated to holy and happy, to Jacob's ladder, that, and I don't even know what it is, but there's just something about it that I'm really enjoying him as his host, whoever it is. And there's plenty of people, and sometimes they look exactly the same, but I know what they're both up to. One of them's totally not into Jacob's ladder, and the other one's totally into Jacob's ladder, and they're both in the same yeshiva, and they're dressed, wearing the same suit and the same tie and everything. But there's just a pleasure being with that person. While the other one's a bit of a stink bug, I'm thinking let's bench when I look at him, and when the other guy is there, I'm thinking let's open up another book on the parsha. Let's look at something else on the parsha. Let's go deeper on the parsha. The other guy's like, why don't we just end this meal here? You ate, get going. So I don't know what it is. And I'm telling you, that's why I said I'm just going to share some thoughts, because I don't know where I'm going with any of this stuff. But
isn't it clear that it's the spark for growth?
No, not at all, because people will consider the spark for growth in this enough of a spark. Whereas I'm saying there's something smells differently when this is the spark for growth. By the way, these people are very into what's called tikkun midas, building good character. They've kind of supplanted this with good character. You understand? Like they really are working on selfishness and ego and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Coe talks about the idea that, say, the study of God is not accessible to everybody. There's some souls that need that, and other souls that need more love, let's say. This is not going to, they just can't. And known guys are more into with Coke and Marshall. There are guys who just aren't. They're not serious with them. They try to have conversations with them. It goes nowhere. And it just seems that their soul maybe delights in action that is righteous and good.
Yeah, it could. Yeah. For those who didn't hear, is what's your name?
Zev.
Zev's bringing up that this could very well be correlated to personality traits. It may be, but what's interesting about that is that when you're born into a community that is about this, and you're this guy, you could really suffer. And if you're born for this, and you're in this community, you could really suffer. So it's a good question. It could be. Could be. It's just a matter of diet for every soul. Different souls, and then there's a question if you're a woman. I mean, I can count on one hand how many women I know that have gotten anywhere in this study. You understand? Like I can literally name them and exhaust the list on one hand. Now, of course, there's tons more that I don't know. I mean, I don't know everybody in the world, but women don't have so much access to that stuff, and you have to know Aramaic, and you have to be able to read Rashi script, and you gotta have access to such svarim, and you can't get anywhere in it, even with all that. You can't get anywhere without a mentor taking you there. And I promise you, none of the men I know over there are taking any women there. Just because there's so much separation in gender, that's just not what's going on over there. It's not co-ed at all. So, and there's nothing wrong with those women. But then I think about my wife. My wife has a tremendous appetite for spirituality, like tremendous, more than mine. And she has found one of the women I can name on one hand. She found one and has made her teacher. So she does have that mentor, and her appetites, I would say, is even bigger than mine for that. So she's proving that gender isn't a barrier for that. But then again, as Zev said, maybe it's just personality traits. Like I married a woman like me who has that as a goal. But I think the biggest proof that maybe is against what you're saying, Zev, or maybe you can show me where it still sticks, is that throughout most of Jewish history, these were one-stop shop. That's Rebbe Akiva saying something in the Mishnah, but that's Rebbe Akiva saying something in the Zohar. That's Rebbe Shimon saying something about Hilchos Shabbos, Psik Reisha V'lo Yamos V'nichale, like we're talking about Davar She'eino Miskam. That's Rebbe Shimon, but that's Rebbe Shimon who scribed the Zohar. You understand? So it was one-stop shop throughout most of history. It wasn't like today where we're so far gone that like when you have a halacha question, you call that one. When you have a Kabbalistic question, you call that one. When you have a question in your life, like a life counseling question, you call that one. Today, everything's specialized because we're, really far down the rabbit hole of Jewish exile. So believe me, it wasn't personality traits back then. It was one-stop shop. They were this was called the first rung of the ladder of Jacob's ladder, as I serve God no matter what. And then there was climbing the ladder. So, but you do notice people have different appetites. People do. I notice my appetite's just different than other people. When it comes to Nigla, revealed Torah, and Nistra, hidden Torah, I think I have a different appetite than other people. My diet requires different amounts than others. But again, we're in a crazy generation. So, that's might have something to do with it. Plus there's social reasons, maybe my upbringing. I'm also, I'm guilty as charged of coming in on a major Balchuva wave buzz, like a crazy buzz, you know. And remember the 90s here? And you were here already in the 80s? What? Remember those buzzy times? I mean, I'm guilty as charged. I came in some crazy buzz, and this place was like, people were just walking around like hallelujah, you know. It was like the craziest time to be here. You just couldn't believe it, both in quantity of people and quality of what was happening. It was just the craziest renaissance that maybe historically unprecedented and never to be repeated, perhaps. But, well, until Mashiach. You really felt Mashiach was coming. Like, we were all shocked that Mashiach didn't come on a daily basis. And the, anyway, but I'm guilty as charged as being involved in a high. And so the fact that I instantly was gravitating towards the high stuff, you know, and spending a lot of time in Sfat and like finding the teachers who had the joy and had the holiness. You know, like I had to find them and then dedicate my path to theirs and emulate them. And you understand? So that's how I came into this whole thing, you know. So I came in when everyone was high. Okay, it was a pleasure. Those who sat through the whole thing, good going. Those watching or listening, please click on all the appropriate buttons. Okay, that's share, subscribe, comment. What else do you got to share? All those things. Click on all those things, and obviously the join the club, the Yom Tov Media Club.com, and help us get this out there as much as possible. Be in Brooklyn next week, and the November 10th in Brooklyn, and November 17th in Muncie for possible use seminars. Please join me. Shalom. Shalom. If you enjoyed watching this, well, watch some more, send it, click it, forward it, join it, subscribe to it. You know, keep coming on and joining me in this amazing movement to make a big difference in the world. And the biggest thing you can do of all is to join the YomTovMediaClub.com. Please go online, YomTovMediaClub.com.